Okay, this is George Topalidis with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, Black Faculty Recruitment and Retention at UF Oral History Project. I am joined this afternoon by Mr. Dionne Winchester and Dr. Dionne Champion. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Champion, again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'd like to begin by asking you, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana, Northwest Indiana, right outside of Chicago.
Okay. Can you share with me some experiences from your formative years that made you feel a sense of inclusiveness and belonging in school, in your neighborhood, your high school, any of those places?
So sure, I always say, not always, recently I've started saying, I've just really realized that my childhood experiences are probably fairly unique compared to most African Americans, people who grew up in this country, because I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana, which was and still is a predominantly Black city. And so, there are lots of people that lived in Black neighborhoods inside of larger cities and metropolitan cities and all of that. But being a product of a Black city, I was raised in a community where everybody was Black. 85% of the people there were Black. So my teachers were Black. My principals were all Black. Like the people that worked in the city government were Black. The doctors, the lawyers, the people that were entrepreneurs in the city were all Black. And what I have come to realize is that experience shaped a lot of how I learned to be a person in my skin, because I never questioned race as being a factor for anything. For example, I was in advanced math classes my entire K-12. I never questioned whether or not I belonged there. Everybody there was Black. So it wasn't like I had to deal with these microaggressions of people being like, oh, well, you're not smart enough to be in this class, or you're only in this class because of, their diversity efforts or whatever. It's just like, you were there because you did the things and you got the grades to be a part of it. And, I got to see across a wide scope different experiences, from people who were very poor to people who were very rich, all within my community, from people who had almost nothing to people who had anything they wanted, all within my community. And so it kind of shaped, I guess, differently than most people would probably talk about their experiences. It shaped how I thought about being a person, how I thought about being Black in America. And I mean, it's not to say that I never dealt with any racism, or that, we still didn't come across ideas about inferiority as a community or as Black people in America. But, it was really critical to my formative shaping, this idea that I could be anything that I wanted to be, because I saw it. I saw examples of it everywhere. I could do anything I wanted to do, even if it meant having to leave the community to do it. There were examples of it everywhere. And, even after that, I went to a historically Black college, the Florida A&M University in Tallahassee. And it was just kind of an extension of that same experience. I got to just be in relationship with just a wide variety of young Black scholars who were there pursuing excellence. And, it just shaped the way that I thought about what was possible.
When would you say you were first aware of your race?
I think I've always been aware of my race. I don't know. That's an interesting question, because I was raised in a family of educators, and my family history kind of has a legacy of activists. My grandfather, my mother's father, was one of the primary union activists in the 1930s and 1940s in Gary. And so I heard those stories all the time from my grandparents, from my parents. And so I don't remember not being aware that race was a thing, or that I was a Black person in America. I was very young when I started to get the messages of, yeah, you're going to have to be better because the world is against you. Like, you're not going to get that extra benefit of the doubt that some other people may get. So you have to actually be better. You can't give them a reason to, find a way to hold you back. You have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you deserve to be there because you're Black.
You mentioned that in the community there were experiences of prejudice, of discrimination. Do you recall any specific episodes that you experienced?
So I remember things when we leave the community, right? So Gary, Indiana is a predominantly Black community, but then it's surrounded by suburban areas that are not predominantly Black at all. And so, you have to interact with your neighbors. You have to interact with the communities that are surrounding you, especially when you live in a Black community that is disinvested and under-resourced. You have to leave to get the things you need. And so, there are times, even when I can remember not really overt instances of racism, but like times when my brother and I were on the swim team, the AAU swim team, when we were children, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And we would travel to the neighboring communities to have swim meets. And always you could feel like the ways that people looked at you like you didn't belong there. People would say things, about the little Black kids that were there. There was an expectation that we were not going to be able to compete, that we wouldn't be as good. And there were moments, and, I spoke before about this message that I received as a little kid about you always having to be better. That was really one of those instances when that happened. I was swimming in the heat and touched the wall first, and somebody touched it right after me, and they consistently would give it to the other person. And my dad would tell me, if you're going to win, you got to win by long enough that they can't dispute it, because they're never going to give you that. So, it was just little things like that.
Okay. Switch gears a little bit. What made you decide to attend college, and did you have any Black mentors or anyone, along the way that sort of put you on that trajectory?
Sure. As I said before, I'm from a family of educators. My mom taught elementary school for 50 years before she retired. My dad also taught elementary school and was an entrepreneur in the city as well. My grandparents worked in the school system. Grandfather was on the school board. I have several aunts and uncles that are all educators. And so it never really was a question for me about whether or not I would attend college. I think that was always the expectation. It wasn't something that was spoken explicitly either, like, you're definitely going to go to college. It was just kind of the way that we were raised. And for me, my father and 2 of his brothers also graduated from Florida A&M, and they were all athletes. And so he started taking us back to visit the campus, to go to homecomings, to go to some of his little events as alumnus. Really early on. I think I was 8 years old the first time I stepped on the campus of Florida A&M University. And when I looked around, I was like, oh, this is where I belong. I knew then that that's where I was going to be going to college.
At FAMU or in your graduate studies, did you experience any prejudice, discrimination, or microaggressions?
So I don't know. I always say I'm a different kind of person, because I don't know that I center those experiences in a way that would shape me enough to make me even remember them as significant. I'm sure that I did. I attended the FAMU FSU College of Engineering. So that's a joint engineering program between both universities. And more than experiencing moments of prejudice or racism, I think the things that I remember most about that experience were shifts in the way that I understood my own perceptions. And so there's an idea. First of all, I went to Florida A&M in the mid to late 90s. This was the era of Dr. Frederick S. Humphreys, who was well known, for recruiting merit scholars, national merit scholars. Just about everybody that I was in school with was there on an academic scholarship in the College of Engineering. And so, we were like at the top of our game. We were like the scholars in the school. The kids that were going to FSU, not so much. Engineering, people that have engineering scholarships don't choose to go to FSU for engineering school. Not really many of them. And so I can remember being in classes. We were in classes, joint classes by the sophomore, junior year with FSU students, and really coming to grips, like starting to understand that, oh, they're not actually smarter than we are. Oh, they're more confused than we are. Oh, we actually understand things that they don't know. And that like being an epiphany, because in our minds we held, well, I won't speak for them. In my mind, I held this idea that somehow they were smarter than we were, or they had all these things that we didn't have. And because we were Black, we were coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they were not. And so that was an epiphany for me, like, oh, wait a minute, what am I thinking? Like, they're not automatically better in some way. I could say that there are instances where I would think that they thought that that was the case as well, but, you know, nobody ever said anything explicit. You know, one of our professors made it a point later on, and maybe our junior year or going into our senior year, he's like, I'm tired of you all being segregated. Like, all the FAMU students would sit in one part of the class, all the FSU students would sit in the other part of the class, which essentially amounted to all the Black students sitting in one part of the class and all the white students sitting in the other part, and not really ever engaging in conversation with each other. So they made an intentional effort to break us up into groups that were integrated, like FAMU and FSU students and all of our groups, so that we would make relationships with each other and work together. And that was effective too. But, you know, it was something that they noticed and tried to be really intentional about, so that we wouldn't go through our entire experience with that divide. Graduate school, my graduate experiences at Northwestern, I can't say that I necessarily experienced discrimination as a Black person. I think more so as a woman. But I was definitely witness to a lot of people as they tried to navigate different research labs, different people that they were working with. And again, even at Northwestern, because this is like North Chicago, it's supposed to be like a liberal place and, you know, all of that. I wouldn't say again that there were very many explicit instances of like somebody saying the N-word or somebody doing something for the intent purposes of keeping somebody that was Black down. But there were a lot of instances of just, I would say, racial ignorance, where people are engaging in activities or saying things that they don't really understand that are racist, or that have implications for students of color or for women and minorities that they don't really think about. And when they're questioned about them, they get real defensive, like, oh, but I'm not racist, so I didn't mean it that way. But they don't really think about the implications that it was having, and how that's also like an impact of the systems that are in place.
Oh, Dr. Champion, could you share with us how did you what motivated you to follow your career path? I mean, I heard you talk about starting off in engineering, and how were you able to connect engineering with dance and education?
Sure. This is an interesting story, I think. I've always done both. I've always done STEM, science, engineering, math, and dance. When I was in high school, I went to a performing arts school. I was a dance major, did some musical theater. And also I was I was in the accelerated academic program. So I was really, you know, interested in math. I did every level of math, every level of science I could possibly take. And honestly ran into some tensions beginning then, where my teachers were constantly telling me I was going to have to choose. You can't do both. You can't be an artist and a scientist. You're going to have to focus on one and not the other. You're going to have to pick. And I just wholly rejected that notion, because for me, it was, I even knew even then that both were a part of me and like really important to the way that I made sense of things, the way that I processed information, and the thing that made me whole. So I tried for as long as I could to just maintain this kind of dance of doing both. Including when I first went to college, I got down on Florida A&M's campus and I was like, okay, I have this engineering scholarship. I'm going to focus. I'm going to stop dancing and just focus on classes are going to be hard. I got to keep my grade point average up. And classes started the first day. I saw a sign posted that said dance company auditions today. And I was like, I'm there. And that was like the end of my attempt to try to do one and not the other. I just knew it wasn't going to work. So I made, like I said, a very conscious effort to be focused enough and disciplined enough so that I could make room for both. And, you know, a lot of times that has been challenging. When I graduated from college, from undergrad, I pursued a career in engineering. I made sure that it was in a place where I could continue to dance. And so I moved up to Rochester, New York to work at Eastman Kodak Company, where Garth Fagan's dance company was also located. And Garth Fagan had just choreographed The Lion King on Broadway at that time. So he was like big stuff. And, you know, taking classes with the company while I was really in my first professional career experience as an engineer, I started to really consider and think about how my dance practices were informing the ways that I made sense of chemistry and physics and math, and how my science and math practices were informing the ways that I made sense of movement as a dancer. And that's what prompted me to go back to school the first time to get my master's in dance education. And I started to study the relationship between movement and learning. From there, developed a curriculum, taught an elementary school dance program, and kind of tried to do some of the work of integrating these math and science ideas into dance learning in a ways that kind of made those connections more explicit for kids, like I wish someone had done for me, because I kind of just figured it out on my own. And that led me to the development of my own school. And after working in that context with those kids for a few years, started to really want to understand better how the experience of dancing in that way, you know, using choreography to learn algebra or using dance to learn physics, was helping them actually learn. And that's what drove me to go back to school to study learning sciences as a PhD. And that's the thing that kind of brought it all together. It's like the design of education, the design of environments, of curricula, and with the understanding of cognition and the social contexts that learning in which learning take place, I guess you should say. So yeah, that's kind of what brought all of that together. And, you know, throughout my career, I've continued to try to create these spaces where the arts and the sciences can coexist. And sometimes, you know, a lot of times it's me having to make the space for that to happen. There are very few job descriptions out there that are like STEM and arts and dance and science. We want to see all those things together. So, you know, a lot of times it's me carving that space out.
You know, Dr. Champion, I must say, you know, in reading about some of your research, I agree. I cannot recall anybody putting the two together the way that you have. And so certainly, I mean, an inspiring story. What would you share to others, you know, to other young girls, to other young folks coming up who, like yourself, you know, they have that drive to, you know, to do, you know, something within them, but the path is not as evident. You know, they have to make their own path. You know, what would you share to others coming up like yourself who have to make their own path?
I think the important thing to understand is no path is easy, whether it seems like it's laid out for you or you have to create it yourself. So you might as well follow your heart and follow the things that you feel strongly about, because if you have the passion and the commitment, you can make it work. There are ways to do anything that you want to achieve. The key is that successful people do the things that failures refuse to do. So if you keep plugging away at it, you know. The other thing I think I would share is that people that don't understand your vision are going to tell you that it's not possible. And so it's important that you are clear about what your vision is. And, you know, it's great to take advice from people and listen, you know, to the things that people are going to offer, because it's important. It's important to get that feedback, but you don't have to necessarily accept when someone else tells you something is not possible, because not anybody else can see your vision. And when people can't see your vision, they don't understand how to make it possible.
You know, Dr. Champion, when, you know, I was reading about you founded a creative arts center in Gary, Indiana, and it seems like you were very active in the community. My question is then, what motivated you to become employed at UF? What to leave all behind what you were doing in Gary, Indiana? I mean, I know you were familiar with Florida some, but why UF?
So I didn't come directly from Gary to UF, almost directly. I did a postdoctoral fellowship in Boston at Turk, which is a STEM education arts collective in Cambridge. And that was the harder decision, leaving the studio to pursue this opportunity to go to Boston to study with people who were actually experts doing this work in STEM STEM education for underrepresented populations. And at the time, I felt like that was not an opportunity that I could pass up. And so I left the studio in the hands of some very capable people, with a plan to go back and forth, and which I've continued to do. I continue to do up until COVID, to go back and forth and stay connected with the initiatives that were going on there. And then from there, the opportunity to come to the university opened up, and I had to think to myself, I thought a couple of things. The first is, this kind of opportunity is not available in Gary, Indiana for me. There's no industry there. The city is kind of dying, like the people are leaving. And so the opportunity to be funded doing the work that I'm doing, to make the impact that I'm trying to make in a larger context than just the city of Gary, isn't there in the city of Gary. The other thing that brought me here is that at the moment when I came to the University of Florida, the College of the Arts was really involved, and has been since then, in shifting the work that's happening here in the college to focus on racial equity, to focus on access and inclusion, and really provided me an opportunity to focus on community as part of my research. So essentially to build the same kinds of initiatives, the same kinds of programs, the same kind of impact in the city of Gainesville as the work that I was doing in the city of Gary. I'm still very much connected to the work that's happening in Gary. It is still the focus of a lot of my research efforts. So I'm able to come back, I'm able to bring resources and funding into the program there through the research that I'm doing here, but then also having the opportunity to do that work here gives me a larger platform and the ability to have a bigger impact on the world, not just the city of Gary, because I can publish my research, because I can work with people and, develop programming that other people can learn from.
How has been your experience thus far at UF? I do recall, I remember when you were introduced to the campus, and in reading your background. And from since then, what has UF been like?
So this is an interesting and maybe difficult question to answer, because 2/3 of my experience at UF has been in the midst of COVID, right? And so it has been difficult to find a sense of community here because I'm in my house all the time. I think that's only part of the issue, though. UF felt to me when I first got here incredibly siloed. Like there were brilliant pockets of work happening in little places all across campus, but no one was communicating with each other. And not only was no one communicating with each other, there were not even systems in place to allow people to really communicate with each other. So it's hard to know who your people are. It's hard to know what's going on and what's happening in other places across campus that might be related or, relevant to the work that you're doing and the things that you're interested in. I am really just now in my 3rd year finding people even within the College of the Arts that are outside of my unit. So not in the Center for Arts and Medicine, but in the School of Theater and Dance, the School of Art and Art History, Digital Worlds, that are finding people in other places across the college that I can actually collaborate with or that I'm interested in working with. And that feels really weird to me because I'm not used to being in spaces where there's just not any communication across units and across departments. UF feels really big. And I think that is great for the number of potential opportunities that are available, but it also doesn't really work if nobody's communicating. And then, within the College of the Arts, as I said, there's really been a push to reform and restructure the way that the college works. So there's much more attention being paid to minoritized populations, to people that haven't had the same kinds of opportunities, even in terms of the way that we're thinking about structuring curriculum to, bring in perspectives that are not just the dominant Westernized perspectives, but that's not something that's happening across the university. Again, like maybe in little pockets in different places. I was really excited. That sounds terrible because, the impetus of it was the death of George Floyd, but I was really excited to see the initiative that the president took to put forth the statement about racial justice and equity and say all of the things that the college was going to do in response to that. I've been really disappointed since then because I feel like a lot of it has just been what was trendy and what they felt they needed to say or needed to do. And now that the trends are shifting, their focus and their attention is shifting to other things that are super problematic. And so in the last 8 to 10 months, it's felt really icky, honestly, being a part of this culture and a part of this community. And, when I talk to people outside of UF, that's always the question, like, what the heck is going on there? And they don't even know the half of what's going on. So yeah, just trying to bring all of those things together and exist in this very weird space right now, where again, I very rarely get to campus. The Center for Arts and Medicine I don't have a designated space on campus. And so everything is shared space. So we're trying to really just go to campus when it's absolutely necessary. So yeah, it kind of feels a little bit isolated.
That is a point that we've heard a lot of others say too as well. And, how do we then, from your experience where you've been in other communities, how do we then build that sense of community? Or how do we then, get to that so that we can be in solidarity to address some of the issues that we are confronting?
Well, I don't know if I have an answer to that, but I will tell you a short story that might be an answer to that. It's funny. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago in Clearwater. It was a conference on AI and health or something like that. And also, it was honestly a small group of people there because part of the participants were virtual, and there were maybe about 20 or 30 people in the room in person. And of the 20 and 30 people in the room, I was there with my partner who was Black, and there were 2 other Black ladies sitting at another table. And we met each other in the hallway, later in the day on the first day, and greeted each other as, hey, the other 2 Black people in the conference. Mm-hmm. And then they asked the question, where are you guys from? Oh, we're from UF. Oh, we're from UF. And this lady said to us, wow, I had no idea there were other Black people at the University of Florida. Because everybody is so, again, insulated in their unit. So, in the College of the Arts, we see other Black people, not many, but they're there. We have conversation and are in communication. But she's like, yeah, I work in a unit where I'm the only one. And I had no idea that you people even existed. And so I think part of what I'm saying with that story is that part of the work I think we need to do is create those kinds of networks that allow us to know that we're all out here. And that's not just necessarily Black people. I think, again, like networks for women, networks for minorities, networks for just all kinds of different affinity groups, I think could be useful because there's not real ways to know otherwise. The university is very large and everybody's kind of working in their own space, and there's not a reason to come across other people that are not directly working with you.
Yeah, and I can see this affecting not just building community, but also affecting how we recruit and retain faculty too as well.
Yeah. And then the other thing that has come up for me a lot of times just in conversation with people here is that there's not really community outside of UF in Gainesville either. So there are not places for people who are not students to gather. There are not activities for people who are not students to be engaged in that are faculty. So, and there's kind of a divide between the adults in the community that are faculty and the adults in the community that are not UF affiliated. And so it's hard to feel like this is home for a lot of people. And, you know, this is something that I've heard in conversation with multiple people. So that's not just coming from me, but this is just a conversation that I've often had with people.
Dr. Champion, I wanted to follow up on the comment you made regarding space. First, I mean, I don't really know what the reasons could be, but can you sort of speculate as to why there isn't a space for the work that you're doing yet? And I mean, this is what you were brought in for. That's one. And I guess the other is, how does that make you feel, not having a space to do the work that you were brought in for?
Sure. I think a couple of things. I think the Faculty 500 is great, and it is allowing the university to bring in new faculty in record numbers, but we're not increasing space in record numbers. And so a lot of people, I think, are struggling with this issue. New faculty are struggling with this issue of, you know, the gap between bringing us in and actually making room for us to be here. And I think the College of the Arts suffers from that specifically because we're a smaller school with a lower budget and honestly like a lower impact, you know, in the university. So we're not the priority. I think I have dealt with it and kind of accepted it as reality, understanding that plans are on the way and, you know, we're trying to work this out. And part of it is because the university is growing, because the college is growing, because the center is growing, and those are all good things. But I've never been in a position where there's just no space for me like that. So it is a weird thing to have to deal with. And I don't take it personally, but it does impact my ability to have community and to collaborate with people and to have meetings with people, honestly, on campus. Like, so there are some really practical things that, you know, are impacted by it. I try to be understanding. And again, like a lot of the work that I do is collaborating with people that are not here anyway. So it's not a huge issue that I don't have necessarily a space on campus, but it does make me feel less connected to the campus.
It's over the past few weeks, it's become public knowledge that there is sort of an issue in terms of the way that administration, as you noted, has shifted its focus from anti-racist work. Can you sort of speak to the direction that the leadership has taken at the College of Arts in relation to racism and anti-racist action? And sort of like, how do you see what is happening as a faculty member?
I'm going to try to speak to this to the best of my ability and answer your question without saying too much. The article that came out in the Chronicle for Higher Ed a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago now, that focused on the College of Education was not a surprise to me, because we are dealing with exactly the same thing in the College of the Arts and have been. So the year that I got here, which was August of 2019, we were starting the process of developing a meta strategy, a strategic plan for the College of the Arts. And our dean, who was 1 year in at that time, and the administrators in the College of the Arts initiated kind of a brand new process for developing the strategic plan, the meta strategy, which involved, so they decided on, and I don't know how the 6 pillars were decided because that happened before I got here, but there were 6 pillars like shared governance, student experience, diversity, equity, and inclusion. There were 6 of them. And for each pillar, they organized working groups. So groups of faculty, staff, and students that would come together and discuss the things that were important, the priorities for this pillar. We had town halls for faculty, students, and staff to come and discuss what they thought should be important priorities, what should be included in each pillar, what should we talk about, what should we leave out, what should we change, what should we leave. They had a writing group. This is like over the course of a year. We had a writing group for each pillar. faculty, students, and staff that came together and decided the language that would go into the meta strategy for each pillar. We had a shared teams document that everyone that was in the College of the Arts can look and give feedback and, make notes about what to include and what to not. And at the end of the year, we constructed this meta strategy, the strategic plan that we posted on the website, which in summer of 2020 was like held up as an example of like the great work that is happening in race and the University of Florida, right? And we had a whole DEI pillar that we changed the language to access, equity, and inclusion for a number of reasons, but that specifically called out white supremacist structures and called out, the need to unsettle the dominant perspectives and the way that things had been done, to take a specifically anti-racist approach to education. And by the end of this past summer, going into the fall semester, the dean got a call from the upper administration, from the provost, saying that she needed to take the strategic plan off the website, take it down, or change some of the language. And they had highlighted words all throughout the strategic plan, mostly in the AEI section, of words that needed to change. And so she had to wrestle with what to do with this request, knowing that this is a faculty and staff produced document. It's not her document, and we have shared governance. She can't make a unilateral decision to do anything with the document, not even take it off the website. And that's what she told the provost, who responded with, well, if something happens, I can't protect you. Like, this thing is out there in the public and somebody might call it to the attention of the governor and the legislature. And if they come for your job, I'm not protecting you. Like, I'm going to say, I told you to take it down. And so she brought the issue back to the faculty. We had a series of meetings to discuss what to do about the issue. And ultimately, through a democratic process, decided that we would bring the strategic plan down off the website and initiate a group to consider what to do with it, whether or not to change the language, whether or not to do whatever. And we're still very much in that process. But it has been a bit of a fight, honestly, between our dean and the upper level administration, which has been complete with all the threats on her job and on the program that she's been building, and other I don't know if I would call them threats, but the president saying, well, if you don't do this, then I could lose my job, and trying to put pressure on her that way. And it's been relatively consistent, or at least it was across the end of the summer and the first maybe 6 weeks of the semester, trying to pressure her like they really were doing it to people all across the campus who had anything that might get called out as in support of some version of critical race theory. That was happening actively, and honestly affected the culture and the morale within the college in a lot of ways. And so we're still actively dealing with it, kind of. We're in the process of deciding what to do with the document, but hoping that this wave of ridiculous politics will pass and we'll be able to go back to some more normal way of functioning soon, although I don't know that happens.
Dionne, for me, based on this experience that you've had, right? Can you speak to sort of like impact on retention, and what should the administration do to retain Black faculty and staff at UF, having gone through sort of this process, seeing all this?
Yeah, that's a challenge, because, part of the thing for us in the College of the Arts, like I said, we went through this because of the Faculty 500. The College of the Arts over the past 3 years has hired more than 40 new faculty members. And part of what they did in that hiring process was they came up with a meta narrative, a little paragraph that went out on each position description that says, we're specifically looking for change makers. We're specifically looking for people that are doing work that is actively engaged in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we hired all these people on that pretense, right? We're coming in to shift what is happening in the college. We're coming in to make an expansive community community that's inclusive and welcoming to all these different diverse perspectives. And in the moments where the dean was having to consider what her move was going to be, understanding that it might put her job in jeopardy, we were definitely considering the notion that you're going to lose all those faculty members, like in a heartbeat. And it's still not clear that we may not lose them. You know, depending on how this thing fleshes out, it's very possible that we lose a lot of those people. A lot of those people are people of color. And so, yeah, I feel like we're in a really challenging position. I just left a conference, a workshop this weekend where people are talking about job postings. And, you know, I was talking to a young lady who was telling me, oh yeah, I saw a position go up at the University of Florida and I thought about applying to the position. And I was like, yeah, you shouldn't. You should not. It is not a good time to be at the University of Florida for a person of color. I wouldn't do it. And like, that's just my honest reaction to her was, yeah, don't. Not right now. And so I think recruitment is going to be an issue the longer these kinds of things play out. And I think retention is going to become an issue the longer that these things play out. And what to do about that, I'm not sure, because it's just so hard to tell what the administration is thinking. And if they, you know, we get the message from them that they support the work that we're doing and they want us to continue doing it. So they want us to fly under the radar so that nobody knows that we're doing it, but we support it. But like, there's so many contradictions in what they say and what they do. It's really hard to know where they're coming from.
You know, Champion, you, I believe earlier on in our conversation, you were talking about that vision, when folks don't believe in your vision, you know, and it almost seems like, you know, in this vision or this new direction that you're looking to take, you know, not a lot of folks, it's not going to be easy, in other words. But my question is, do you feel that with all of the faculty that was hired as part of this initiative, do you feel like there is a critical mass of faculty, of support around the leadership, like-minded, like-hearted, to be able to, not only protect the mission, but to advance, you know, to realize that vision that a lot of folks having difficulty seeing?
I do. I think if we're not at a critical mass, we're starting to get to the point where we're going to be very soon. I think that there's still a momentum to continue this push. And I think that, you know, we have been doing the work as a college to get people up to speed so that even the ones that don't necessarily understand the vision are starting to develop the language and develop the insights to really see that vision more clearly, to understand the issues and the things that are at stake. And so I do think that critical mass is developing. We're just really at a tenuous point right now. Like it's hard to know in this moment on this particular day, whether we go forward or fall back.
In your view, are faculty members and staff members, administrators who can be externally categorized or self-categorized as white, are they part of that critical mass?
Yeah, for sure. We have a lot of white faculty that are definitely a part of that critical mass. And you know, I think it breaks, unfortunately, but honestly, I think it breaks down more by age than by race, like older faculty versus younger faculty, or even by people that have senior faculty and junior faculty.
Go ahead, Deon, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Oh, you're talking to that, Deon.
So in what view, what does it mean to be an effective ally?
I think speaking truth to power is important. I think being able to call out the injustices when you see them is important. I think being able to learning how to share ideas in a language that is effective, that doesn't relate to just like, oh, I feel this, or, but really being able to understand the academic languages to use in order to express the issues. And understanding where you're a gatekeeper, like what power do you have to make a shift? You may not be able to change the entire system, but you may be in a position, where you have a say over who gets an interview or who gets to apply for a position, whose application gets looked at. Understanding where you are as a gatekeeper and the power that you have is important. Those are some of the things I think that allies can do. I mean, just having an awareness, taking the blinders off and understanding where you are privileged and how you can use your privilege to help other people that are not in the same situation.
Sort of in a related point, speaking about allyship, a lot of white allies, as they're referred to, white co-conspirators, I think is the most recent terminology. What do you think about the Black Lives Matter movement? What's your view of the movement and sort of the white participation in the movement?
I think Black Lives Matter movement gets a bad rap because it's characterized by the enemies as a certain thing that it's not necessarily. I think there's, not speaking as a representative of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think there's room for everybody in the Black Lives Matter movement. Also because I just think that there are a lot of different ways that we need to approach the problem. Like this is not an issue that has one solution. And so when you're taking a multifaceted approach, you need to use every angle that's available to you. And sometimes your white allies are an angle that's available to you. And so while they may not be able to do specific things, there are things that they can do, like check each other. Like there are times when white people are not going to hear a message the same when it's coming from a Black person, but they'll hear it in a different way when it's coming from a white person. That could be important. There are things that everybody can do. I don't think racism is a Black people's problem. It's not a minority people's problem. It's an American problem. And so we need everybody on hand to help create the solution.
In your view, what is a way that the administration could sort of leverage the conversion of lecturer positions into tenure track positions?
I don't know. I think one of my first questions, and I don't know, I think one of my first questions is, who are the people that have these lecturer positions? Like what are the demographics of the people who have lecturer positions versus the people that have tenure track positions, and why? Like, I'm not sure I understand enough about the who the people are to really understand the benefit or the power of doing that. Same thing with adjuncts. I think we need to start looking a little bit harder at why certain people have certain positions and how do we all benefit from shifting the structure so that it's more equitable for everyone.
Having joined the university recently, what is your view on tenure? And do you think the tenure and promotion process is fair?
Again, I'm a different kind of person because I'm an anti-academic academic. I did not go into this to become a tenured faculty at a Research One institution. That was never my goal. And so my ideas and approach to tenure are just a little bit different. I do think that tenure is an important tool that we have to guarantee academic freedom. Maybe, I mean, today it's hard to even say that, but I think it's important. it may not be the thing for everyone though, but I think that's a choice that the faculty person should make, and not, be relegated to a non-tenure track position because that's all that's available. But for me, I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't deny myself a tenure track position, but I'm not in it for the tenure part of it. I'm in it for the work part of it. So whatever position that I have that allows me to do the work and do it effectively, I'm fine with. I know that I'm going to do good work. I know that I'm going to be in a place and do the work that I can do until another opportunity comes along that allows me to do work better in a different place. And if that doesn't, and this is the place that I end up staying, I'm fine with that too. But I don't look at tenure as a thing that I need necessarily to have job security. I know that a lot of people do. I think, I don't know, it's a flawed model in some ways, because for the people that it works really well for, but the people that get left out are just always left out, and that's kind of inequitable.
Champion, I do hope that you don't leave, and you are one of the faculty members, amongst others, that we retain. Dean Usuzu, she wrote an article, and that sort of looked into what the curriculum, would look like in 2030, 2031. Hoping you are around as well. How do you see what you do? How do you see your role in connecting the dots, per se, to getting us from 2020 to 2018 to 2031?
Sure. I think that the role that I play is at the intersections of a lot of things. I hope to move us toward a more interdisciplinary way of doing education, because, the silos that I talked about earlier are not just physical ones, they're definitely curricular ones as well. I would like to help us move to a place where, as a university, we are more responsibly engaged with the communities that are surrounding us. And honestly, that's not just something for the University of Florida. I hope to see my work create a model for other institutions for how to do that as well, because honestly, there are very few places, research institutions, that are good at doing that, researching with communities without exploiting them. And so I hope that I can be a part of the initiative that makes that happen, that teaches faculty and students how to work with community in responsibly engaged ways. And that becomes a part of just the way that we work. So it's not a special thing. It's just, part of what you learn when you learn to do research. Those are the kinds of things that I would like to contribute, just generally.
Thank you. And we hope that, in what we do, that we support you in helping you do what you do as well, because certainly what you all are doing and the College of Arts is doing is certainly a model, not just on other colleges on campus, but as you said, throughout the community and others too as well. So definitely, any which way we can continue to support you guys.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
Second Dionne's point there. We hope that this project certainly helps in any capacity to bring these points to light and sort of reveal what is needed to be done still. So thank you. We don't want to take up any more of your time. Really appreciate you joining us this afternoon for our interview. And we will be in contact again soon. We'll send you the information. We do have one follow-up question after we turn the recorder off, and then we'll conclude. But I'm going to turn the recorder off at this point. Thank you.
Thanks.